Okay, who am I here with today?
Jenny Liz Hernandez.
And do you know your family background?
Yeah,
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. My family, both sides, mother and father, are Puerto Rican. Um, I grew up in Puerto Rico for like all my life. Went to college in Puerto Rico. I did 1 year I studied abroad in the United States 1 year in a boarding school to learn English.
What year was this?
This was in my senior year of high school.
Okay.
But then I went back to Puerto Rico for college and graduated, and I initiate my family while still living in Puerto Rico.
Okay, and what's your educational background and career?
Yeah, so I did a bachelor degree in finance, and since I graduated, I started working in the financial industry, specifically in the brokerage investment side. I work for a big bank, top 3 of the United States. I have been with the bank for 23 years as of today. I started working in Puerto Rico about 7 years with them, and I got an opportunity to relocate to St. Louis 15 years ago, and that's why I'm here now.
So, from that moving, how do you think the American dream kind of affected you in that process of like before even thinking about college or whatnot? How do you like growing up? How do you think the American dream was in general?
Well, Puerto Rico being part of the United States, we had a lot of growing up, a lot of influence in school. We like in Puerto Rico, the books that we use are the same books that are used like when it comes to like subjects of math, of history, like science. So we've had very much influence. Also like TV, we had access to cable. So we grew up seeing like what the 4 seasons look like, what a winter, something that doesn't happen in Puerto Rico, what a winter and snow looks like, and the thought like that was portrayed of the American dream is owning your house, having a steady job, your kids having a good education, like just being stable financially and able to provide and have like a nice fulfilling life.
So that's how you kind of like grew up with
That's
the
like
American
seeing
dream?
that, thinking that's the goal.
So how do you think that perspective has changed, or if maybe it has just stayed the same? Like once you moved to America and you brought like your kids and your husband, how did that change, and is it still changing with like the certain economy, or like how has that changed at all, or what?
Well, clearly that's what I wanted, right? I wanted a house. I wanted to have a steady job. I wanted to be able to provide. I working in Puerto Rico, it was challenging. The cost of living in Puerto Rico, it's very expensive. It compares to like a Miami, Florida. And the jobs, like the workforce, kind of like have the pay scale treat us as a third world country. So you barely make a lot of like enough money to even survive in the island. That's the sad reality. So when I had the opportunity to relocate, when I lived there, I was struggling, I was struggling to be able to afford a house. So when we came over, the fact that free education public system here is awesome. That's something that it's not over there. Like we had to pay for private school if we want a decent education for our kids. Like just cost of living, it's way more affordable, more opportunities, right? Like the company that I was working had a main home office here, so the amount of opportunities increased significantly. So like by making that decision, even though it was tough leaving our family behind, we were able to I was able to like achieve that American dream that I was looking for. being able to own my own house, give a good education for my family, continue exceeding professionally, growing professionally within the company and the industry that I love, and just being able to have like enough of a good life where we're still able to travel, we're still able, to make meets ends, and without having to be thinking like paycheck to paycheck. What can you? For me, that's the like. I think that's the key of in my mind, what the American is when you're able to not live paycheck to paycheck, and you
Not
have
really think
that
about the money.
financial like peace in your day to day.
So you said you worked at a big bank firm.
Yep.
So, and you're a pretty high class or higher rank in your business, right?
Yes, I have, in 23 years, I have, multiple roles, and I am in an executive position today in the company.
So, as a woman, like in the business industry, and I feel like in any industry, I feel like there's some like hardships you go through, or even maybe some like easier paths than other. Can you expand on if you've had any advantages or disadvantages or hardships any along the way?
Well, imagine, first of all, my industry, not because I'm like on the investment side of the financial industry, that's a male dominant area more than traditional banking. So, and going back 23 years, right? Like, and coming to the state 15 years ago, tons of challenges. Not only I was the only female in the room multiple times, multiple meetings, I have an accent, and I started young in this industry, so not anymore. But I used to be the youngest person in many rooms, so plenty of challenges. I think for me, I had no room for error. Everybody else, a white male, can go into a room, make a mistake like every other human being will do, and there'll be excuse for it. In my mind, I was already being looked at. I didn't deserve to be there, as if I'm a check in the box. I've been told that. So I had to prove myself. I had to work twice as hard to prove myself ongoing, like making sure like I have no room for error. I had to be precise, because like anything that like it will be used against me. So things have changed. Like, we've grown as a society. There's been like tons of diversity and inclusion efforts, education. I don't think that's the case anymore. Actually, I've seen my industry transition, where right now I lead meetings that we have one man, and it's mostly women. I think now it's a little bit more diverse. I'm not saying it goes one way or another, but we have a little bit more diversity, more and then more understanding. Also, like, as companies have, like, my company is now like a global company. Now there is more understanding, and not a lot of pushback on because somebody has an accent, but definitely 15 years ago there were plenty of challenges.
So, with your like knowledge on the banking and money movement, what are your thoughts about like the wealth and mainly the wealth distribution in this country?
That's something very interesting. It's not equally divided. Yeah. And me working in this industry and having all kind of financial situations, like from like I had kids young, so I was struggling at the beginning, and I've been able to grow with the company. So as my income is growing, I can see how there is a ridiculous amount of wealth in this country. I work in a division right now that we support like 10 million plus clients, and we have a lot of clients. But what I've seen that is like on a little bit, what I think is a little bit unfair and a little bit of, it's like we financial institutions, we accommodate, we customize everything for that type of client. We make it easier for a high net worth person to do business when, and then we like the people that are struggling, trying, the young people that are graduating, that are starting to get their first job, they're trying to buy a house, they don't have the income, they don't, and then we gave them higher interest because they don't have their risk here for the bank. So that makes like this economy like a, it doesn't really, it's really tough to go through to pass that for the middle class, because the middle class is like sustaining everything in this country, and it's very challenging, because even when you get to like a higher tax break, we're not at the super rich tax break. So what happens is like, yeah, you're making a little bit more, but you're barely making a little bit more, but now you're taxed on a higher level. So it's like the government, everybody's taking away from you. So I think it's like the middle class, it's like, which is, I believe it's a majority of the people in this country, has a tough one. We are the ones like supporting the day to day of this economy, and it's a survival out there.
So speaking on social class, like, do you think you're in that middle class, or do you think you're in like a higher or lower middle class?
I think we've been fortunate on moving up into like a little bit of like more like a higher middle class. Um, at the same time, being growing up with like being in the very lower end, we've been more safe with when it comes to manage our money, and really assessing like not overspending, not, I think the only reason why we would be able to get into a more solid financial stability, it's because even though we progressed professionally, we didn't change our lifestyle. And I think that's what people, we save the money because I want to retire. And I think a lot of people grow and they grow their lifestyle accordingly. And then when things happen, like right now where we're seeing people losing their jobs because the economy is challenging, so companies are cutting costs, they don't have a bandwidth to, and then start losing everything, because you need to be careful. It's very easy when you get more money, it's very easy to want to spend it, but having that control around yourself, and being able to manage your financials, I think that's been the component that has helped us being a little bit of like, I would say, on the higher end of that middle class.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, one quote I found from the book Passing that we read in literature was, "She belonged in this land of rising towers. She was an American. She grew from this soil and she would not be uprooted." And I think that correlates to the theme and message of the person I interviewed, because it's kind of like the sense of meaningfulness that like kind of like the American dream symbolizes, and that like even though you could be like in a rough place in America, like there's always a hope of going to a better place or being better in the future. And then another one that I had was from The Great Gatsby, and it was, he had intended probably to take what he could and go, but now he found that he had committed himself to the following of a grail. So this kind of signifies how Gatsby really just like chose money, or he was like getting a lot of money, and because he thought like the American dream was like really just to get up a woman and be happy, and he thought that like attaining this woman would like it would be easier if he'd have all the money in the world, which like basically he had at that point. But later in the story, he then finds out that even though he has all this money and whatnot, it eventually doesn't end up like going his way, and it kind of alludes to how the American dream can be flawed in many aspects. Um, Before this assignment, I thought like the stereotypical American dream was like to have a car, a house, like the perfect family, two kids, a wife and a husband, and like you had your own like plot of land. And after interviewing my person, it really kind of like shows how like the American dream is thought of a like pretty similar way, but the people who actually like achieve it, who come from something different and like go to America to like become something new, it's very challenging and hard, and it is easier. It's more obtainable in America than in per se other places, but it's not perfectly what like many people think of as the American dream. There's a lot of hardships to they then become happy in the quote unquote American dream. Thank you.